The engineer had never imagined he would find himself on the outer colony, so far from Earth, surrounded by strange alien landscapes and colors he had never seen before. The colony was small but important. It was home to one of the galaxy's rarest creatures, a feline beast owned by the Queen herself. The beast was famous across the stars, not for its beauty, but for its strength and danger. Many who had come close to it had been seriously hurt, and some never returned. Yet despite the warnings and tailies, he had been drawn here. Something in his curiosity, or perhaps his sense of duty, had brought him to this remote place. He had been sent to repair some malfunctioning equipment near the royal habitat. The colony was a mix of technology and nature, with metallic structures intertwined with thick, twisting vines and glowing plants that lit the area like lanterns. The air carried a strange, sweet smell that tingled the nose, making the engineer feel both alert and slightly uneasy. Every step he took echoed softly on the metallic floor. He kept reminding himself to stay focused. One wrong move could spell disaster, not just for him, but for the colony. As he approached the habitat, he noticed a sudden flicker of movement. At first, he thought it was just the light reflecting off the metal, but then he saw it clearly. The Queen's beast was trapped. A section of the structure had collapsed, leaving massive metal beams pressing down on the creature. Sparks flew from a broken panel, and smoke curled into the air. The beast, which was massive with sharp claws and glowing eyes, struggled and growled, its roar shaking the nearby walls. It was clear that it was in pain, and every attempt to move caused it to thrash violently. The guards were rushing toward the scene, but he noticed something in that moment that made him act. The beast's eyes were filled not with rage, but fear. It was a living being in agony. He knew he could not wait for the guards to arrive. They would likely hold back, afraid of the beast's reputation. Without thinking about the danger, he ran forward. His heart pounded in his chest. The closer he got, the louder the creature roared, but it was not attacking him. Its fear was stronger than its aggression. He quickly assessed the situation. One beam was pinning down the creature's leg. Another pressed dangerously close too. Its body. He had tools in his bag: crowbars, mechanical jacks, and small cutting instruments. He grabbed the largest jack and placed it carefully under the beam. Sweat ran down his forehead as he worked. Sparks flew from a nearby exposed wire, and the metal groaned as if protesting his efforts. Every second felt like a lifetime. He could hear the creature's low, pained growl, mixed with the occasional whimper. The beast's eyes followed him, glowing in the dim light. Despite its size, it seemed almost fragile under the weight of the metal. His hands shook slightly, but he forced himself to focus. Slowly, carefully, he pumped the jack, lifting the beam just enough to relieve the pressure. The creature tried to pull its leg free, wincing but not lashing out. Another beam was heavier, and he had to use all his strength to lift it, one tiny movement at a time. He could hear the metal bending slightly, and he prayed it would hold. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The engineer felt a strange connection with the creature, as if it understood he was not there to harm it. He spoke softly, almost whispering, though he doubted the creature could understand him. "It's okay. You're going to be free. Just a little more." His voice trembled slightly, but the words seemed to calm the beast. Its growls softened into low grumbles, its massive head moving slightly toward him in a gesture that seemed almost trusting. Finally, with one last push, beam shifted just enough for the beast to crawl free. It stumbled on its injured leg, but managed to pull itself to a safer spot. The engineer stepped back, breathing heavily, his arms sore and covered in cuts from the metal edges. Sparks still flew, smoke lingered, and the scene looked like chaos. But the creature was alive. It paused for a moment, looking at him with wide eyes. Then slowly, it lowered its massive head toward him, almost bowing in a strange, silent gesture of gratitude. The guards arrived at that moment, shouting and waving their weapons. They had never seen anyone dare approach the beast in such a way, let alone save it while it was injured. They hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The engineer raised a hand, signaling them to hold. The creature did not attack. Instead, it limped slightly closer to him, circling around as if checking he was still there. Even in pain, it moved with a grace and power that took the guard's breath away. Word of the rescue spread quickly. By the time the Queen was informed, the entire colony was buzzing with whispers. No human had ever interacted so directly with her beast, and no human had ever risked their life for it. Some were skeptical of his intentions. Others were amazed by his courage. The Queen herself, known for her strict rules and high expectations, was curious. She had watched the rescue from a distance through her surveillance system, and she could not deny what she had seen. A human, alone and unarmed, had approached her most feared creature and saved it from certain death. The engineer did not seek recognition. He had acted on instinct, driven by a sense of responsibility and empathy. He had always believed that every life mattered, no matter the species, no matter the danger. As he cleaned his tools and prepared to report the incident, he could not help glancing back at the beast. It was lying down now, breathing heavily but calm. Its eyes met his again, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. He did not know if the creature would ever forgive him for approaching it, but he knew it recognized his intentions were pure. That night, as he slept in the small quarters assigned to him, he could not stop thinking about the creature. The memory of its glowing eyes, the weight of its massive body, and the moment it looked at him without aggression stayed with him. He felt a strange mix of fear and respect. He realized that this was only the beginning. Saving the creature had not just changed its life, it had changed his as well. The colony, the Queen, and the beast itself had witnessed an act of courage that few could imagine. He wondered what would happen next, how the Queen would respond, and what role he would play in the story that was already unfolding. For now, he could only rest and prepare. Tomorrow, he would meet the Queen and face questions, scrutiny, and perhaps skepticism. But he knew one thing clearly. He had done what he had to do. He had acted without fear, without hesitation, and in doing so, he had formed a connection that might one day change everything. The morning after the rescue, the colony was buzzing with excitement and whispers. Everyone seemed to know about what had happened the previous day. Some spoke in awe, others in disbelief. No human had ever dared approach the Queen's beast in such a dangerous situation. The creature, which everyone called the royal feline, had a reputation for being merciless, but now it was alive thanks to the engineer. He felt a mix of pride and nervousness. He had saved the beast, yes, but he knew that the real challenge was yet to come. The Queen herself would soon hear the story, and he had no idea how she would react as he prepared for the official meeting. He checked his tools, straightened his clothes, and tried to calm his racing heart. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. Saving the beast had been instinctive, almost automatic, but now it had consequences. The Queen was known to be fair, but also strict. She valued loyalty and courage, but she was also wary of outsiders. One wrong move could turn admiration into suspicion. When he arrived at the palace, he was escorted through corridors that gleamed with metal and light. The walls were lined with intricate designs, showing the history of the colony and its royal family. Servants and guards glanced at him with curiosity. Some whispered, others stared openly, their expressions a mix of admiration and doubt. The air was thick with tension. Every step he took echoed in the long hallways. reminding him that this was no ordinary visit. He was brought before the Queen in a grand hall, filled with sunlight streaming through tall windows. She sat on a throne that seemed almost carved from living crystal, radiating authority and calm. Her eyes, sharp and curious, focused directly on him. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of energy flowing through the palace. The Queen's advisors and guards surrounded her, all waiting for her command. The engineer bowed slightly, showing respect, but he kept his eyes on her, ready for whatever questions or judgments were coming. "Explain yourself," the Queen said, her voice calm but commanding. "Why did you risk your life for a creature that could have killed you?" Her tone was measured, but there was a hint of surprise in it. No human had ever been so bold. Her advisors whispered among themselves, clearly unsure of how to respond. The engineer took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her gaze. "I did what I had to do," he said simply. "The creature was trapped and in pain. I could not leave it there. I had the tools, I had the strength, and I could help. I did not think about danger. I just acted." His voice was steady, but he could feel the tension in the room. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, and he wondered if he had said the right thing. The advisors murmured, clearly surprised by his honesty. Some looked impressed, while others shook their heads. They had grown up believing the beast was untouchable, that any attempt to approach it was foolish or suicidal. Yet here was a human, standing calmly and explaining his actions with no hint of arrogance or fear. The Queen studied him for a long moment, then turned her gaze toward the beast. The feline had been brought closer to the hall, still injured, but alert. It watched the engineer with glowing eyes, tilting its head slightly, almost as if it understood that he had saved its life. It had not been trained to recognize gratitude, yet in its own way, it seemed to acknowledge him. Its tail flicked. Slowly, a subtle sign of interest rather than aggression. The Queen observed this carefully, her expression softening slightly. "You acted without fear," she said finally, her tone softer now. "That is rare. Courage alone does not impress me, but your actions show something more." She paused, studying him closely. "You showed compassion, something most humans lack when faced with danger. You treated a powerful creature as a living being, not as a tool or weapon." Her words surprised him. He had expected criticism, or at least suspicion. But she was praising him. The advisors exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others looking skeptical. The beast shifted slightly, its massive body moving with careful grace. It limped toward the engineer, stopping a few feet away, and let out a low, rumbling sound. It was not a growl of anger, nor a hiss of warning. It was a sound that seemed almost like recognition. The engineer felt a strange warmth in his chest. The creature, which had been feared by everyone, had chosen to acknowledge him. Over the next few hours, the Queen questioned him in detail about the rescue. She wanted to know how he had assessed the situation, how he had avoided injury, and what had motivated him to act. He answered honestly, describing the steps he had taken, the tools he had used, and the fear he had felt. He admitted that he had been afraid, but he had pushed through it because the creature's life mattered more than his own. Each answer seemed to impress her further. The beast remained close by, watching carefully. At one point, it reached out a massive paw, not aggressively, but gently brushing against the engineer's leg. The guards flinched, unsure of what to do, but the Queen simply watched, her eyes thoughtful. It was a rare gesture, almost intimate, and it revealed the trust forming between human and beast. The engineer felt a bond growing, fragile but undeniable. He could sense that the creature understood he had saved it, and he felt a responsibility to care for it as it recovered. By the end of the day, the Queen made a decision. She would allow him to continue assisting with the creature's recovery. It was unprecedented. No outsider had ever been given such permission. He would not only care for the beast, but also learn about its habits, behavior, and needs. The Queen emphasized the importance of trust, loyalty, and patience. She warned that the creature could be unpredictable and that his life would not be without risk. Yet she trusted him enough to take on this responsibility. The engineer accepted without hesitation. He felt a mixture of pride and humility. He was no longer just a visitor or a worker. He was now part of a story larger than himself. He would care for the Queen's beast, earn its trust, and perhaps even form a connection that few humans had ever experienced. The colony watched with fascination, whispering about the unusual human who had faced the beast and lived, and who now held a position of influence in the royal habitat. As evening fell, he prepared for the first night, caring for the creature. He cleaned the area around its resting place, checked its injuries, and set up the equipment it would need to recover. The beast lay quietly, its eyes half closed, but it remained alert. Occasionally, it shifted slightly, its gaze following him. Wherever he moved, he spoke softly, explaining what he was doing, though he knew it might not understand the words. It was the tone, the calm and steady voice that seemed to matter. Throughout the night, he stayed nearby, ready to respond to any movement or distress. The colony outside was quiet, but he could feel the tension in the air. Caring for the beast required constant vigilance. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light could startle it. Yet despite the danger, he felt a deep sense of purpose. He was protecting life, building trust, and stepping into a world that was both alien and fascinating. By the time dawn arrived, the beast had grown slightly calmer. It had tested him with small movements and sounds, but he had remained patient and careful. He had learned its signals when it was in pain, when it was curious, and when it felt threatened. A bond was forming, slow but steady, built on trust and mutual recognition. He realized that the rescue had been only the beginning. The true journey was in understanding, caring for, and connecting with a creature that had once seemed untouchable. The Queen observed from a distance, noting the interactions. She was impressed not only by his courage, but by his patience and empathy. She understood that trust could not be commanded. It had to be earned. And this human, against all expectations, was earning it. The colony would remember this day for a long time. A human had not only saved the Queen's beast, but had begun to form a bond that might change the way humans and the royal creatures interacted forever. Days passed since the rescue, and the engineer had settled into a routine with the Queen's beast. Each morning began with careful checks of its injuries, gentle feeding, and small exercises to help its muscles regain strength. Despite the danger it had once posed, the creature seemed to sense that he meant no harm. Its glowing eyes followed him wherever he moved, and its massive body occasionally pressed close to him in moments of trust. He had never worked with a creature like this before, and each day brought new surprises. The Queen had allowed him to spend time observing and learning the beast's behavior, but he still had to be cautious. Guards remained nearby, though they rarely intervened, watching silently as the human and the creature interacted. The beast's reputation had not diminished in their eyes. One wrong move could provoke it, and the consequences would be deadly. He felt the weight of responsibility every moment, knowing that one mistake could undo all the trust he had worked to build. One afternoon, as he cleaned the habitat and checked the healing progress, the beast suddenly stiffened. Its ears twitched, and its body lowered slightly, as if sensing something in the distance. The engineer froze, scanning the surrounding area. He saw nothing at first, but then he noticed movement at the edge of the colony, a shadow slipping between structures. The beast growled low in its throat, a sound filled with warning. The engineer's heart raced. He realized that even in this controlled environment, danger could appear at any moment. He stepped slowly toward the shadow, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. The beast stayed close, moving its massive body to shield him slightly. It was as if it understood that he was human and could not defend himself in the same way it could. The shadow resolved into a scout from a rival colony, attempting to sneak through unnoticed. The engineer stayed calm, remembering the lessons he had learned from past rescues. He raised his voice, calling out in a firm but steady tone, and the scout froze. The beast's growl deepened, and in a sudden movement, it stepped in front of the engineer, its massive frame blocking any approach. The scout's eyes widened, and for the first time, the human understood the true power of the creature he had saved. It was not only a living being in need of care, it was also a guardian, a protector. The scout retreated quickly, intimidated by the sheer presence of the beast, and vanished into the shadows. The engineer let out a quiet sigh of relief, feeling a mixture of awe and gratitude toward the creature. This incident marked a turning point in their relationship. He realized that the bond he had formed was not one-sided. The beast had recognized him as someone who had saved its life, and in return, had chosen to protect him. From that moment, he felt a growing sense of connection and mutual respect. Every day, he learned more about its habits, moods, and signals. Small gestures, like a tilt of the head or a shift in weight, carried meaning, and he began to anticipate the beast's needs before it even acted. The colony began to take notice of their unusual relationship. Workers and guards whispered in admiration as they observed the human moving confidently alongside the once feared feline. Some were skeptical, fearing that the beast's temperament could change at any moment, but others were fascinated by the bond. They watched as the engineer cared for the creature patiently, never forcing it, never showing fear, and gradually earning its trust. It was a sight no one had expected, and it inspired a sense of wonder throughout the colony. One morning, while administering a routine check on the beast's injuries, the engineer noticed a subtle change. Its breathing was heavier, and its eyes flickered toward the entrance of the habitat with intense focus. At first, he thought it was a minor discomfort, but then he realized the beast was sensing something he could not. He followed its gaze and saw a group of newcomers approaching the colony, clearly outsiders. They were armed with strange devices, their expressions determined. The engineer's heart raced, understanding immediately that this could be a threat. Without hesitation, the beast positioned itself between him and the newcomers, its body low and tense. It let out a deep, resonant growl that shook the ground slightly. The newcomers froze, unsure how to proceed, clearly intimidated by the creature's presence. The engineer stayed calm, keeping his hands visible and speaking in a gentle, firm tone to show he meant no harm. The beast remained alert, its glowing eyes never leaving the intruders. It was clear to him that the creature was ready to defend him if necessary. The situation passed without violence, as the outsiders chose to retreat rather than confront the formidable guardian. Still, the experience left the engineer shaken. He realized that saving the beast had not only given him a companion, but also a protector, one that could sense danger and respond with unmatched speed and strength. The bond they shared had become practical as well as emotional. He felt a growing responsibility to care for it fully, understanding that its loyalty was now intertwined with his safety. Over the next few days, the engineer focused on strengthening this connection. He introduced structured routines that helped the beast regain its strength, incorporating small exercises that tested its agility without pushing it too hard. Each session was accompanied by calm, reassuring words, and he observed every reaction. Carefully, he learned that patience was more important than force, and that trust could be maintained only through consistency and respect. The beast responded positively, showing subtle signs of comfort, such as relaxed movements and lowered ears, which indicated a growing sense of security around him. He also began to notice the intelligence of the creature. It was not merely instinct-driven. It observed, analyzed, and reacted in ways that suggested understanding. Simple commands or gestures were enough for it to anticipate his actions, and it seemed to make decisions independently when protecting him or assessing a situation. This intelligence deepened his respect and admiration. Caring for it was no longer just a responsibility. It had become a partnership. Meanwhile, the colony continued to observe. Guards began to adjust their routines, respecting the unique relationship developing between human and beast. Some were still wary, fearing that the creature's unpredictable nature could emerge at any time. But even the skeptics had to admit that the engineer had earned its trust. Word spread to the queen, who watched from a distance with a mixture of curiosity and cautious approval. She understood that the bond between them could be significant, not only for the safety of the colony, but also for future interactions between humans and her royal creatures. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the colony, the engineer and the beast sat quietly together. The creature's head rested near him, its breathing steady and calm. He could feel its pulse beneath its massive body, a steady rhythm that seemed to sync with his own heartbeat. For the first time, he felt a profound sense of connection, not just of survival or protection, but of mutual respect and understanding. He realized that the rescue had been only the beginning. What had started as an act of bravery had grown into a relationship that would shape both their lives in ways he could not yet fully imagine. As night fell, he reflected on the lessons learned so far. Courage alone had not saved him or the creature. Empathy, patience, and respect had been just as important. He understood that living alongside such a powerful being required more than skill. It required heart. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trust the beast had shown, and he knew that protecting it was no longer optional. It was a responsibility he would carry willingly, knowing that in return he had gained a protector, a companion, and a friend who would stand by him through dangers yet unseen. By the end of Part 3, the engineer had not only proven his courage and skill, but had also solidified a bond that few humans could ever experience. The beast, once a symbol of fear and power, had become his guardian and confidant. The colony watched in amazement as this unlikely friendship unfolded, and the engineer realized that his life had changed forever. He had entered the Queen's habitat as a visitor, a worker, and he was beginning to emerge as something far more significant, a trusted companion to one of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy, a protector who would face challenges together with him, and a silent partner whose loyalty was absolute. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the engineer and the Queen's feline beast continued to grow stronger. Each day brought new discoveries about the creature's habits, moods, and intelligence. It was clear that it was not merely following him out of obligation or instinct. It was making choices, showing preferences, and responding to his actions in ways that seemed almost thoughtful. The engineer found himself learning more from the beast than from any manual, any instruction, or any previous experience he had had with creatures, human or alien. The colony, too, began to adjust to the new dynamic. Guards and workers who had once kept their distance now observed with curiosity, often whispering among themselves about how the beast seemed almost to have accepted the engineer as its companion. Even the Queen's advisors began to acknowledge the unusual trust that had formed. They had seen countless humans interact with our royal creatures, and none had ever earned this kind of respect. What had started as a daring act of rescue had transformed into a remarkable partnership. The beast itself was fascinating to watch. It moved with precision and power, each step deliberate, Yet it could display surprising gentleness. It would sometimes nuzzle the engineer lightly, a gesture so delicate that anyone else might have thought it accidental. At other times, it would shift suddenly, ears flicking, tail lashing, as if reacting to a sound or a presence invisible to human eyes. Through careful observation, the engineer began to understand these signals. He learned when it was playful, when it was cautious, and when it was ready to defend. Feeding time became a kind of ritual. The beast was selective and methodical, not demanding, but always aware of how the engineer interacted with its meals. He noticed patterns in the way it ate, paused, and sometimes even toyed gently with its food. It was not just a creature of instinct. It displayed intelligence, curiosity, and awareness. Each interaction taught him patience and attentiveness. He realized that caring for this being was not just about tending to its injuries or feeding it. It was about understanding its needs, moods, and the subtle ways it communicated. As the days passed, the engineer also noticed that the beast had started to follow him even outside its immediate habitat. When he walked through the colony to check equipment or gather tools, it would silently trail him, moving with a quiet grace that drew the attention of anyone who saw them together. Guards who once regarded him with suspicion now watched with awe. Workers whispered stories of the human who had tamed, or perhaps befriended, the Queen's most feared creature. The engineer, however, felt no pride in the attention. He was focused on the trust he was building, knowing that it could be fragile if mishandled. One afternoon, the Queen herself came to observe their routine. She did not speak at first, simply watching from a distance as the engineer attended to the beast's exercises and feeding. The beast seemed aware of her presence, its body tensing slightly, but not in hostility. Instead, it maintained a calm, measured posture, as if showing the Queen that it had accepted the human fully. The Queen's eyes followed every movement, noting the subtle cues of communication between them. She was impressed not only by the engineer's courage, but by his patience and understanding. Few humans could navigate such interactions without fear, yet he moved with confidence, respect, and care. The Queen spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "You have earned something rare," she said. "This creature trusts you. It has not done this for anyone before." Her words carried weight, and the engineer felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had not sought recognition. He had only acted out of instinct and empathy. Yet the acknowledgement made him realize the importance of the bond they had formed. It was more than a rescue. It was a connection built on trust, patience, and understanding. As the beast recovered further, the engineer began to introduce new challenges to strengthen it. Small exercises, carefully monitored, helped it regain agility and muscle tone. He would hide small objects or create simple puzzles, observing how it responded. The beast quickly demonstrated its intelligence, solving problems, learning routines, and anticipating his moves. It was clear that it was more than a wild creature. It was thoughtful, adaptable, and capable of independent judgment. Each successful interaction strengthened their trust and mutual respect. The colony began to take notice of more subtle behaviors. The beast no longer reacted aggressively to strangers unless it sensed real danger. When visitors approached it, would watch silently, body low and alert, but only intervened when necessary. Guards and workers began to see that the human's presence was a calming influence, almost as if he had taught the creature restraint through trust rather than fear. Observing them together, people could sense the growing bond, something extraordinary that few had ever witnessed. The engineer also began to notice a shift in the beast's behavior toward himself personally. It would sometimes nuzzle his hand or shoulder without prompting, a gentle sign of acknowledgement that seemed almost affectionate. When he paused in his work, the creature would settle near him, keeping a careful watch on his movements. At night, it would lie close to his quarters, alert but relaxed, its eyes following him even in sleep. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, knowing that its loyalty was not just instinct but a conscious choice. One day, the engineer encountered a minor problem while inspecting a section of the habitat's equipment. A sudden mechanical failure caused sparks and smoke to rise dangerously close to the beast. Without thinking, he stepped in front of it, shielding it from harm. The creature paused for a moment, eyes wide, then followed his lead, moving calmly. Behind him, it was the first time he truly understood the depth of their connection. The beast was not only recovering and learning, but it was also responding to him, trusting him to guide it safely through danger. The queen continued to observe these developments with interest. She realized that this human had achieved something remarkable. He had formed a relationship with a royal beast based on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. She had seen courage before, but this was different. It was not merely bravery in the face of danger. It was empathy, patience, and attentiveness that had earned the creature's loyalty. She began to consider the implications of such a bond. Perhaps humans could be trusted in ways she had not believed possible. If they approached with care and respect. As the weeks went on, the engineer also began to notice subtle changes in himself. He had entered the colony as a visitor, a worker tasked with repairs, and yet he had found a purpose he had never expected. Caring for the beast required him to be vigilant, patient, and observant in ways he had never needed to be before. He realized that his life was no longer about simple tasks or daily routines. It had become intertwined with the well-being of a creature whose loyalty and trust depended on him. This understanding gave him a sense of purpose and connection that was deeply fulfilling. Even in the quiet moments, when the colony was calm and the sun set over the alien landscape, he felt the bond growing stronger. The beast would lie nearby, breathing steadily, its massive form a comforting presence. He could feel the rhythm of its breathing, the subtle shifts of its body, and the gentle flicker of its tail. These small details, once insignificant, now carried meaning. They were signs of trust, of acceptance, and of a relationship that had developed through shared experiences, patience, and mutual respect. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that the engineer and the Queen's beast were no longer separate entities, but companions in a silent partnership. The beast had learned to trust and respect him, while he had learned to observe, care for, and understand a creature far beyond ordinary comprehension. Their bond was unique, extraordinary, and powerful, built not on fear or dominance, but on empathy, courage, and patience. The colony watched in fascination, the Queen observed with cautious approval, and the engineer understood that his life had entered a new chapter 1 where trust, loyalty, and partnership would guide him through challenges yet unseen. Life in the colony had started to feel routine, but there was always an underlying sense of alertness. The engineer and the Queen's feline beast had grown accustomed to each other, their bond deepening with every passing day. They shared unspoken communication, understanding gestures, tones, and movements that only they could interpret. The colony had come to respect this unusual relationship, and even the Queen observed it with cautious approval. Yet none of them could foresee the real test that was about to arrive. It began quietly. The engineer was checking the outer structures of the colony when he noticed unusual activity on the horizon. A group of unfamiliar ships, sleek and dark, was moving toward the colony, maintaining a stealthy approach. He felt a chill run down his spine. These were not ordinary visitors. The colony had defenses, but the fleet looked organized, trained, and determined. Without hesitation, he ran back toward the habitat, knowing that the Queen and the royal beast had to be alerted immediately. As he entered the habitat, the beast was already alert. Its ears flicked, and its tail lashed with tension. It had sensed the approaching danger before he could even finish explaining the situation. The engineer spoke calmly but firmly, describing what he had seen, and the beast responded, moving closer to him as if ready to follow his lead. It was clear to him now that the creature had internalized its role as a protector, not only of itself, but also of him and ultimately the colony. The queen was immediately informed of the approaching threat. Her expression remained calm, but her eyes narrowed with concentration. She trusted the engineer and his instincts, and she also understood the unusual loyalty of her beast. Together, they began preparations. The colony's defenses were activated, and workers and guards were instructed to follow strict protocols. Despite the tension, the engineer noticed how calm the beast remained when he was nearby. Its loyalty and readiness were reassuring, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. When the intruders arrived, the situation escalated quickly. The first waves of the attackers landed near the colony's outer perimeter, moving with precision and intent. The engineer took his position near the habitat entrance, and the beast positioned itself in front of him. The creature's massive form and glowing eyes created an intimidating presence. The attackers, trained and armed, had clearly underestimated the power of the queen's protector. Their hesitation bought precious time for the colony's defenses to mobilize. The engineer realized that this was more than a test of courage. It was a test of trust, partnership, and understanding. He issued simple gestures, and the beast responded instantly, moving to block potential threats and protect the colony's workers. It was a display of strength and intelligence, unlike anything the human had ever seen. Every leap, every defensive stance, and every growl communicated a clear message. No one would harm them while the beast was near. The intruders attempted to breach the habitat, but the beast was quick and strategic. It used its size and agility to create barriers, pushing attackers back while avoiding unnecessary aggression. The engineer coordinated with guards, giving signals to ensure safety for humans in the area. It was a delicate balance, requiring precision and trust on both sides. The beast, fully aware of the stakes, adapted its movements in response to the engineer's guidance. Together, they formed an unspoken team, each relying on the other's strengths. The queen watched from a secure vantage point, her eyes fixed on the scene. She observed the beast's protective instincts and the engineer's calm leadership, understanding that their bond had become crucial in the defense of the colony. The attackers, confused by the unexpected coordination, began to retreat in some areas, realizing that brute force alone would not succeed. The colony had a defender unlike any they had faced before, and the presence of the human who had earned the beast's loyalty made the difference. During the chaos, a sudden threat appeared near the engineer. One of the attackers broke through a barrier and aimed a weapon toward him. The beast reacted instantly, leaping with incredible speed and placing itself between him and the danger. Its massive form absorbed the impact, and it roared with a sound that shook the ground and stunned the intruder. The engineer watched, heart pounding, as the creature demonstrated its willingness to risk itself for him. In that moment, he understood fully that the bond they shared was no longer simple trust. It was a mutual commitment to protect one another. The battle continued, but the tide had shifted. The attackers, disoriented and intimidated by the beast's presence, began to fall back further. The engineer directed guards and workers to secure the perimeter, while the beast patrolled, ensuring no intruder could approach unnoticed. It moved with precision, its every action coordinated with the human's commands. Even in the heat of danger, the engineer noticed moments of intelligence in the beast's decisions, anticipating attacks, reading intentions, and acting with careful judgment. By the end of the confrontation, the intruders had retreated entirely. The colony was safe, and the queen's habitat remained unharmed. Workers and guards who had witnessed the event were amazed. The human who had once been a simple engineer had stood alongside the Queen's beast, facing overwhelming danger with calm, courage, and strategy. And the beast, once feared for its deadly nature, had acted not with indiscriminate aggression, but with protection, loyalty, and understanding. The Queen called the engineer to her once the immediate threat was neutralized. Her expression was a mixture of admiration and contemplation. She spoke with quiet authority, acknowledging not only his courage, but the extraordinary bond that had developed between him and her royal protector. "You have earned something rare," she said. "This creature's loyalty is not easily given. You have proven yourself worthy, not only through bravery, but through care, patience, and understanding." Her words carried the weight of both praise and recognition. The engineer felt a deep sense of humility. He had not sought recognition, and the battle had not been about glory. It had been about survival, trust, and partnership. Yet, standing before the Queen, and knowing that she acknowledged the bond he had nurtured with the beast, filled him with a quiet pride. He realized that the rescue, the care, and the countless hours of patience had led to this moment. He was no longer just a visitor or a worker. He was a trusted partner to a being of incredible power and wisdom. The beast, recovering from the exertion of battle, returned to his side and nuzzled him gently. It was a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude, a silent affirmation of the partnership they shared. The engineer understood that this was more than companionship. It was a bond forged through experience, trust, and mutual respect. The colony had witnessed a rare and extraordinary alliance, one that demonstrated the power of courage, empathy, and connection across species. That night, the engineer remained vigilant, though there was a sense of relief in the air. The beast lay nearby, alert but calm, watching over the colony and the human it had chosen to protect. The engineer reflected on the day's events, realizing how much had changed since the initial rescue. What had begun as an act of instinctive bravery had grown into a deep, mutual trust that had been tested under fire. Together, they had faced danger, protected lives, and solidified a bond that was unbreakable. In the quiet hours, he thought about the future. The colony had survived this attack, but he knew that other threats might come. He also knew that he would not face them alone. The Queen's beast, once feared for its deadly strength, had become his protector, his companion, and his ally. Together, they had proven that courage, empathy, and understanding could overcome even the greatest challenges. The engineer felt a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. He was no longer just a worker or a visitor. He was part of something extraordinary, a living story of loyalty, courage, and partnership that would be remembered in the colony for generations. By the end of Part 5, it was clear that the engineer and the beast had formed a bond that transcended fear, danger, and even species. Their partnership had been tested in the crucible of real conflict, proving that trust, understanding, and loyalty could create a powerful force. The Queen, the colony, and the witnesses to the battle recognized something extraordinary. A human and a beast, united not by necessity, but by choice, standing together to protect what they cared for most. The events of this day would mark the beginning of a legacy that neither the engineer nor the beast would ever forget. After weeks of training, care, and countless shared experiences, the bond between the engineer and the Queen's feline beast had grown into something extraordinary. They had faced dangers together, survived attacks, and earned mutual trust that went beyond words. Every day, the engineer felt more connected to the creature, and it seemed to understand him in ways that no one else could. It was not just a guardian or a pet, it had become a companion, a partner, and a protector who chose to stand by him willingly. The colony had settled into a calm rhythm, but the engineer knew that peace was never permanent in a place so far. from home and so close to unknown dangers. Still, the trust he shared with the beast gave him confidence. They moved together through the colony, the massive feline following silently, alert to any threat. Workers and guards watched with awe, whispering among themselves about the unusual partnership. Some who had once doubted the human's ability now respected him deeply. The queen, observing from a distance, nodded with approval, recognizing the unique connection that had formed. One morning, the engineer noticed a subtle change in the beast. It had grown more comfortable, relaxed even in public spaces, but its eyes were still sharp, scanning the horizon for threats. He understood that it had learned to balance vigilance with trust. He approached it slowly, speaking softly. The beast responded with a gentle nudge, a small gesture that had become their silent way of communicating. These moments were rare and precious. They reminded the engineer that their relationship was not only about protection and survival, but also about companionship and understanding. As he tended to its daily exercises, he realized how far they had come. The beast moved with strength and precision, yet it showed patience and restraint. He had taught it through respect, consistency, and empathy, and it had reciprocated with loyalty and intelligence. Together, they were a team, navigating the challenges of the colony with cooperation and trust. This partnership had transformed both of them. The human had learned patience, observation, and courage in new ways, and the beast had learned trust, understanding, and a sense of companionship that no one else had offered. The queen called for a private audience one afternoon. The engineer, accompanied by the beast, entered the grand hall with a mixture of respect and curiosity. The queen's expression was calm but commanding, her eyes fixed on both of them. "You have done more than I could have expected," she said. "You have earned the trust of a creature that no human has ever approached safely. You have protected it, cared for it, and in turn, it has chosen to protect you. This is rare, and it carries great responsibility." The engineer bowed slightly, feeling the weight of her words. "I only did what I thought was right," he replied. "I could not leave it in danger, and it trusted me. I could not betray that trust." The queen studied him carefully, then nodded, a gesture of approval and understanding. She gestured toward the beast. "It is clear that your bond is strong. It will continue to be your protector, as long as you honor it and the responsibility it carries." The beast, as if understanding every word, brushed gently against the engineer's leg. Its glowing eyes met his, and he felt a deep sense of connection. This was not a simple alliance of convenience. It was a bond built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared experience. The queen's acknowledgement confirmed what he had known. All along, the creature had chosen him, and he had chosen to honor that choice. Life in the colony continued, but the dynamic had shifted. The beast was no longer seen merely as a dangerous creature or a symbol of power. It was also recognized as a loyal protector, capable of empathy and choice. The engineer's role had expanded as well. He was no longer just a worker. He was a partner, a caretaker, and a trusted ally in the colony's daily life. Guards and workers looked to him for guidance when the beast was present, knowing that he understood its signals and moods better than anyone else. One day, a minor emergency occurred when a small structure in the outer colony began to collapse. The engineer and the beast arrived quickly. The structure was precarious, and workers nearby were unsure how to respond. The engineer acted decisively, coordinating the workers and using his knowledge of the colony's equipment to stabilize the area. The beast remained close, its massive body alert and ready, protecting both him and the workers. It had become more than just a companion. It was an integral part of safety and survival in the colony. After the situation was resolved, the engineer spent time observing the beast, noticing subtle signs of intelligence and awareness. It seemed to anticipate problems before they arose, reacting with precision and calm. He realized that their bond had not only strengthened mutual trust, but had also enhanced the beast's ability to act independently while remaining connected to him. They were partners in the truest sense, each relying on the other's strengths, respecting each other's judgments, and sharing a sense of responsibility for the colony's safety. The Queen occasionally visited to witness their interactions. She watched as the engineer trained the beast, observed its habits, and anticipated its needs. She was impressed not only by the courage he had shown during the initial rescue, but by the patience, consistency, and empathy he had displayed every day since. It was clear to her that he had earned a place of trust, not only in the eyes of the beast, but in the colony itself. One evening, as the sun set over the alien horizon, casting long shadows across the colony, the engineer sat quietly near the beast. It lay close to him, massive body relaxed, but still alert. He could feel its warmth, hear its steady breathing, and sense its awareness of every movement around them. In that quiet moment, he realized that their journey had been about more than survival. It had been about connection, trust, and the power of understanding across differences. The beast had become his protector, yes, but it had also become his companion in a way that transcended species, fear, and expectation. Looking back, he remembered the first day he had seen the creature trapped under the collapsed beams. Fear and uncertainty had filled the moment, but he had acted with instinct and compassion. That single act had changed everything. It had forged a bond that would last, a partnership that had been tested through danger, challenge, and patience. He understood now that courage alone had not been enough. Empathy, respect, and understanding had been equally important. As the weeks continued, the colony thrived under this newfound balance. The beast moved freely, strong and confident, yet always attentive to the engineer and the colony's needs. Workers and guards respected the partnership, learning to communicate with the creature in ways that aligned with the human's guidance. The Queen remained watchful but pleased, recognizing that the engineer's actions had created something rare and extraordinary, a true alliance between human and beast, one built on trust, loyalty, and shared experience. In the quiet moments, the engineer often reflected on the lessons he had learned. Courage was not only about facing danger, it was about choosing to do what was right, even when the outcome was uncertain. Trust was not demanded. It was earned through consistent action and respect. And partnership was not about dominance. It was about understanding, communication, and mutual care. These lessons had been written not in words, but in actions, shared. Between him and a creature that had once been feared by all. By the end of Part 6, the story had reached a point of calm resolution. The engineer and the Queen's feline beast had proven that extraordinary bonds could be formed through courage, empathy, and patience. They had faced danger together, survived attacks, and built trust that transcended fear and expectation. The colony recognized their partnership. The Queen acknowledged its significance, and the engineer understood the profound responsibility he carried. The beast was no longer just a royal protector. It had become his companion, his guardian, and his friend in a way that would shape the rest of their lives. Together, they stood as living proof that trust, courage, and understanding could overcome even the greatest challenges. A human and a beast, united not by necessity but by choice, had forged a bond that was strong, enduring, and extraordinary, a story that would be remembered and told for generations to come, inspiring those who witnessed it to believe in the power of empathy, loyalty, and connection.